So as I said earlier, we are going to be diving into the story of Jonah. Most of us, or some of us, maybe I should say, know this to be the favorite of the Felt Bible School stories. I loved when the big whale would come out, and then, the little characters going across the felt board, and then the whale swallows them up, and the little felt character goes behind the whale. It was my favorite story. Okay, sounds like maybe I was the Sunday school nerd in the group. It's fine. Those were good days. But the story of Jonah begins with a real prophet. Jonah was a real prophet. We have the recording of Jonah, son of Amittai, shown in 2 Kings chapter 14. He lived in the northern kingdom of Israel in the 8th century BCE, during the reign of Jeroboam II, if you remember that time period. Some scary times for the Israelite people. Jonah was remembered then as a national prophet who spoke favorably about Israel's expansion. He was rooted in a particular time, place, and history. But the book of Jonah, this story that we're about to read, was written much later. Scholars believe it came together after the exile in the 5th or 4th century BCE, long after Nineveh had fallen to the Assyrians and were gone, which tells us something. The author wasn't trying so much to write a history book. The writer was writing a parable, a story with bite and satire. Jonah is different from other prophets. When we read of Isaiah and Jeremiah, Amos and Micah, they give us long sermons, direct words from God. But Jonah gives us almost no oracle at all. And in fact, on the 4th chapter, when we get to what he prophesies over the people, it's quite short. Instead, we get a story about a prophet who refuses to prophesy, who runs from his call, who gets angry when God shows mercy. It's an ironic tale where the pagan sailors seem to pray more faithfully than the prophet, and the wicked Ninevites repent faster than Israel ever did. So why this story? Why did it get preserved into Scripture? Because after the exile, God's people were wrestling with questions of identity. Who are they now? And is God's mercy really for all of us? Does it stretch beyond our borders, even to our enemies? Jonah is told to make us wrestle with these questions. And that's why Jonah is not just a fish story for children, but it is a parable for us grown-ups. A story that exposes our reluctance, our resistance, and our struggle with a God whose mercy goes further than we want it to go. So for the next couple of weeks, let's dive in. Let's start in chapter 1 of the book of Jonah. We are reading verse 1 through 16. You'll notice there are 17 verses in chapter 1, but we're saving the fish for next week. Let's read together. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, "Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah set out to flee Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish, and paid his fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. Such a mighty storm came upon the sea that the ship threatened to break up. Then the sailors were afraid, and each cried to his own God. They threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it. Jonah, meanwhile, had gone down even further into the hold of the ship, had laid down and was fast asleep. The captain came and said to Jonah, "What are you doing sound asleep? Get up, call on your God. Perhaps the God will spare us a thought so that we will not perish." The sailors said to another, "Come, let us cast lots so that we may know on whose account this calamity has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, "Tell us why this calamity has come upon us. What is your occupation? From where do you come? What is your country? And of what people are you?" "I am a Hebrew," he replied. "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were even more afraid and said to him, "What is it that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them so. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea was growing more and more tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up, throw me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. I know it, because this great storm has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship back to the land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more stormy against them. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, O Lord, we pray, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not make us guilty of innocent blood for you, O Lord. You have done this, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked up Jonah, they threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord even more, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. "Go at once to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their evil has risen up before me." You see, Nineveh lay east. It was inland from Joppa, up through the valleys, across the mountains to the great river. It was not an easy journey, but it was a clear journey. The call of God was to climb towards the mountains, to rise up to the hard path of obedience for this prophet. But Jonah instead went west. Instead of rising towards the mountains, he went down to Joppa, down to the sea, down to a ship bound for Tarshish, and then down into the hull of the ship to go down into a slumber. This was no wrong turn, as I thought as I was a child. I thought he just, like some of us, got on the wrong boat. No, there's no boat to Nineveh. It's a city up in the deep mountains. He knew it was the wrong direction. And isn't there something of Jonah in all of us? Choosing the sea when God calls us to the land. Jonah, the prophet's very name, means dove. Son of Amittai translates directly to son of faithfulness. So this Jonah here in this parable is supposed to be the faithful dove. Do you remember the faithful dove from Noah's story? Sent out over the waters to search for the land. And when the dove found it, returns the olive branch, the sign of peace and promise of hope. That dove truly was a messenger of new beginnings for the world. But this dove, Jonah, son of Amittai, goes into the water, doesn't seek the promise of the land to bring the message of peace. He runs from it. Jonah the dove sinks into resistance. So the Lord hurls a great wind upon the sea, and the waters rise up in fury. The ship groans under the weight of the waves. The ropes strain to hold them ashore, and the timbers threaten to snap in half. And who starts to pray and cry out but these big, burly, dirty sailors? They start crying out and praying to their gods, praying for salvation. They threw cargo and tried to lighten their weight. They literally got rid of the things that were most important to them as almost offerings to the sea to please God. They were wide-eyed, frantic, and desperate. But Jonah, the pastor, the chaplain, the holy one on the ship, yeah, well, he's asleep. The prophet of the living God, silent in the storm. What is it to live in a world where the sailors are praying for mercy and the prophets are held up in their churches sleeping? The sailors cry out with all of their strength, each to their own God, and the prophet sleeps. But the captain comes and shakes him awake. "What are you doing, sleeper? Get up, call on your God. Perhaps your God can spare us." Do you hear the echo? These are the very same words that Jonah has just ignored from God, now ringing visibly and audibly in his ear from the captain's mouth. Get up, call. The captain repeats God's command. The sailors cast lots, desperate to know who to blame for this storm, and the lot falls on Jonah. "Who are you? Where do you come from? What people are you?" And Jonah speaks out. "I am a Hebrew. I worship Yahweh, the Lord, the God of heaven who made the sea and dry land." You see, Jonah declares with his mouth that he worships the maker of the sea and of the land, but his life is running in the opposite direction. Does that sound familiar? Words of faith, but steps and actions that tell a different story. The irony is sharp, but the sailors are still trembling with fear. What have you done? The sea grows wilder, and the sailors ask, "What should we do that the sea might quiet down for us?" And Jonah answers, "Pick me up, throw me into the sea, and it will become calm again." Is this surrender? Despair? One last attempt to escape the mountains of obedience by sinking even further into the depths of death? The sailors strained against the waves, oars digging deep, muscles burning, trying to row back to the land, but the sea keeps raging fiercer and fiercer still. They want to save this man's life. This ship seems so kind. Fine. Finally, they pray, not to their gods, but to Jonah's God. "Please, O Yahweh, the Lord, do not let us perish because of this man's life. Do not make us guilty for innocent blood." They're calling him innocent. With trembling hands, though, they lift up Jonah and they hurl him into the sea, and instantly the waters calm. The storm ceases. The waves lay flat. The howling winds give way to the piercing silence. The sailors fear Yahweh, the Lord, with what it says as a great fear. They offer sacrifices. They make vows. The outsiders, again, are praying. The foreigners are worshiping. The pagans have found God. What happens when those we least expect begin to worship God more faithfully than we do? And where is Jonah? But sinking down, down, down. This is where the story leaves us with its final press here in the first chapter. You see, Jonah's not afraid of the storm. Jonah's not afraid of the sea. It seems as though Jonah's not even afraid of death. What Jonah seems to fear most is grace. Grace that would rise up to the mountains that he refuses to climb. Grace that would reach for Nineveh. Grace that would embrace the wrong people. And so Jonah went down to silence, down to a sea of despair. The greatest storm of Jonah chapter 1 is not the one upon the sea, but the one in Jonah's heart. And maybe the greatest storm in us is not what rages around us, but what rages within us. When God's grace stretches further than we want to go. Amen.